Alright, welcome back guys. In this video here, we're going to briefly do one example from lesson 2.1, introducing frequency tables and not quite histogram yet, just kind of some of the terminology when it comes to understand how to interpret a frequency table. Usually for this lesson in a classroom setting, we would actually collect our data like these right here, or data in persons and do an example where we can actually have fun with it. Whereas this, we're just going to use a pre-existing data example and just kind of go off by it. So when we collect data and we have to figure out a way to organize data, the first thing we can do is create a frequency table where we label the frequency of the number of things occur in certain groups. So these are groups, right? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 groups here, and then the groups are the age group. So these are the age group here, right? And then this is just the counts number. So just counts of the number of people belong to that group of year, in this case age. So this is an example of year or age when a word was one, and then the right hand side is the frequency with respect to that group. So it's just some of the terminology when it comes to label these things. We have the lower limits and the upper limits. So let's start with the lower limits for each class. So so each of these are class or group, so just call them class. So the lower limit class will be these guys here. So the first class, we had 25 to 29 years of age. So the lower limit will be the lowest number there, right? So starting from 25 is the first lower limit. So we got 25, right? And then the next class is 30, right? As you can see that, right? So another thing we want to, there's 7 classes, so there's 5 more numbers. Another thing we want to make note of is class width. Okay, so the class width will be the width of the lower to upper limit. So in this case, the upper limits will be 29 for first class. So I'm just going to write on this side here. So we'll say upper limit. Okay, so first one is 29, right? And the next one will be 34. So I'm going to go over the place here. So just bear with me here. So the class width will be just the difference between, two consecutive lower limits or 2 consecutive upper limits. So you see from 25 to 30, the class width in this case is 5, and then it's consistently you have 29 to 34. That's also 5 as well. So the class width is 5. So we can actually figure out the rest of these lower and upper class limits by using the class width. So we just add 5 to each of these numbers. So 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. So these will be the lower numbers or lower class limits. And the upper will be from 34 plus 5 will be 39, 44, 49, 54, and 59. So those will be the lower and upper class limits, and then the width will be the difference between any of those consecutive numbers. The next thing we have is the midpoint. So the midpoint is the value that between each class, which is the middle value. So we have midpoint. So we call this class midpoint, right? Okay. So for the first class, we're looking at 25, 29. The midpoint will be what, 27, right? And then we can say, okay, for each class, the class was just 5. So from there, we'll just add 5 to get all the class midpoints. So 27 plus 5 will be 32, and then 37, 42, and then 47, 52, and 57. So those will be the class midpoints. Let's see, class boundary. Class boundary will be the value that before or after each class lower and upper limit. So the value before 25 will be a 24.5. So give or take about 0.5. So class boundaries. So we can say class boundary will be, let's see, we got 24.5 for the first one, right? And then next one will be 29.5. And then we just keep adding the class width to each of these numbers. So we're going to get 34.5. 39.5, 44.5, 49.5, 54.5. Having these numbers here just allow us to choose how we want to label the histogram when we actually graph this data. This is just from frequency table, but nowadays we don't really graph things by hand. We just use technology to display all this data much easier. Because imagine if you're working with a larger set of data, like, you know, not just 100 frequency in this case, but, you know, 1,000 or millions. Figure out all this number by hand, it can be very cumbersome. So this is just to give us an idea here. The last thing we want to look at is the total frequency, the total count. So let's erase this. So total count, total frequency. All right. So total frequency will be the all these add up here, right? So total. I think is you add that right, you get 90. So 90 is total frequency. So in addition to frequency table, this is a frequency table. We also have, you know, relative frequency table. And what that is we just displays not the counts, but the percentage or the decimal value of each age group. So if we were to do this one, so we say age, in this case is age group, and then we have frequency, and then we have relative frequency. Okay. All right. So we have 7 group. So we got 25 to 25, 29, 35 to 39, 40 to 44, 45 to 49, 50 to 54, 55 to 59. Frequency, we got 31, 35, 12, 4, 5, 2, 1. I'm just going to do just a few first ones so you get an idea how to calculate the relative frequency. So the total is 90. To get the first percentage of the age group of all the people between 25 and 29 years old, we take 31 frequency divided by the total frequency, which is 90. And that give us a relative frequency, or the percentage of it, or the decimal. So about 34%, so 0.344, right? About 34%. And the next one, we have 35 over 90. What is that? 35 divided by 90. So that would be about 38%, so 0.388. And you keep doing this here, and you should get the sum to be close to 100% or 1. Okay, and that's the goal there. So sum is roughly to 1. Okay, so if you do this, you should get the sum to be roughly 1. So just briefly introduce frequency table, relative frequency table. Not much going on here. Do not stress out about the terminology of all this class with midpoints and all that stuff. Again, in real life situation, we're going to use technology to do all this stuff here. The next video, the next lesson will be how to depict these data or these frequency table, the data in general. That is using histogram and bar graph, and we're gonna do a quick example. Probably gonna go back to this example again and just show you guys how to draw the histogram, and we can choose to label either using the midpoint or the class upper and lower limits, and even boundary as well. So multiple way of doing it. Another thing we discussed in this chapter is distribution. So when we depict these data using graphs, we can look at what will be the shape of the data is being displayed. We call the shape of the data when we actually graph them. We call that is the distribution of data. Another pretty straightforward chapter. Not much going on, but in the previous chapter, we learned how to collect data using different method. We learned how to classify data. In this chapter, we're gonna learn how to depict data using graph charts, and actually there's a lot of different graphs and charts in statistics class. We're not going to talk about all of it, but just a few of them. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.